You're listening to Operation Self Reset with Jake Naraki. What is going on, you freaking awesome people? Welcome back to Operation Self Reset. My name is Jake Naraki, coming to you live from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where each and every week we dive into a different topic in the world of personal development. Today we're going to be talking about the Gordian's Knot. Now, it sounds ridiculous, and it kind of is. I don't know if it's a real or not story. Get it? Not Gordon's Knot. Ha 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 ha. Okay, enough with the jokes there, Jake. I know. Say that for a professional. But regardless, anytime that there is a lot of information that was provided from back in the day, it's always hard to justify if this is real or not. Uh, no, every time I'm going to say not, it's just going to be funny to me. But anyway, the interesting part is that when we learn things, it's probably because it's an education moment, right? It's either because we messed up and we're learning from it, or they're informing us about information that was gathered a long time ago and brought to us today. Textbooks, for example, in schools, it's not that they are not educational. It's actually a collection of information and tests that were done over time, put into a book to educate us to the level or the stature today. Now, the reason why I bring up the Gordian's Knot is because it's an interesting little story that allows us to look at problems in a different light. Now, I know you are living on this earth, and I know that you're not perfect, neither am I, so nice to meet you, unperfect 1 to unperfect 2. And life is unique in that there's times that we're super excited, there's times that we're super depressed, there's times that we're super anxiety, there's times that we're super thrilled, and every emotion in between. Now, I've spoken on this, and that's what makes life life, but there are times that a problem will come into our lap or come into our lives, and it's very complex, it's very robust to the point of we want to give up. Now, it would be easy for me to sit here and do the rah rah, never give up, try until you, if you first don't succeed, try again. All those famous quotes and ideas are all really valid. And I think they're a good baseline for us to lean on when the going gets tough. You need something to kind of assist you in those moments when things are getting hairy here, you're getting exhausted, you're really starting to lose steam. And thinking of those easy comments of never quit, never give up, keep on going, work harder are good to a degree. But I would say as you get older, the idea of never giving up and push forward, embrace the suck, kind of loses its luster. And I'm in my mid 30s here. I've gone through a lot in my personal life, and I know if you've lived even a couple years on this life, you have gone through something yourself. So, with that, kind of led me into understanding and learning about this story about Gordon's Knot. Now, the reason why I bring this up is, again, because there are problems in our life. And for the people that choose not to live with the idea of never giving up, sometimes we get ourselves tangled up in a problem and we know the solution can be found, but the problem is so robust, we just rather give up and walk away. And that's okay at times. But I want to instill with you a couple of stories, actually two in this case, about Gordon's Knot, and then the second one about Christopher Columbus that I've spoken on before. Now, Gordon's Knot, to be honest, I don't know the exact details of the story. If you would like, there is books and articles and Wikipedia and information and pictures and slides about Gordon's Knot. And Gordon's Knot was basically, I'll tell you the story. I'm not going to cut to the chase because you need to know the story. Long, long time ago, in basically a country that was before Turkey, I could research that, but I'm not going to. In basically Turkey, there was a town, a city that needed a king. And at the time, you understand that there were these oracles and mythical people that kind of ran these cities, and they were the ones that believed very deep into mythology and into different gods, the sun gods and gods of water and gods of earth and all these different types of people. And so one oracle in particular really praised this one god that was like Zeus, basically kind of the creme de la creme, the big kahuna in the god world. And And Zeus, this god that was like Zeus, talked to this oracle and said, the next person that walks through, or I should say, that is on a wagon that is attached to an ox, is going to be your king. So this oracle feels this, senses it, and he tells everybody in the town, the next person that comes through the gates on a wagon, getting pulled by an ox, shall be our king. Well, sure enough, a couple days later, who comes through the gates? This dude. Dude comes through the gates on a wagon, getting pulled by an ox, and so be it. He is now the official king. Talk about an interesting day for that guy, huh? Could you imagine yourself coming into a city with your wagon that's probably all battered and torn apart and worn down, with your ox that you didn't really feed it good food, and you're coming in to sell some of your goods from your farmland that it took you 10 hours to ride into this town from your farm to the town, and next thing you know, now you're king. Wow, that must be quite the exhilarating process. But anyway, so the guy comes into the town, he becomes king, big party, big celebration, and after the celebration, his son Gordon decides to how do I put this? Decides to celebrate his dad as being king by tying this very complex knot on the end of the wagon. So the oxes are gone. The wagon sitting there is a kind of a replica of good faith and good spirits and good gods that have looked upon down on his dad. His son decides to create this enormous, large, complex knot that is basically impossible. It's done so well and so tight that nobody can untie it. So, a couple days go by, weeks go by, Oracle feels another message from basically Zeus, and the Oracle says the next person that can untie this impossible knot shall rule Asia. So everybody starts trying to untie this knot. If this oracle says the next person that comes through the gates is going to be king, and that person does, well, then he's kind of the guy to listen to, right? So people try and tie in the knot. They can't figure it out. They can't figure it out. It's too tight. It's too long. It's complex. Even the people that say to themselves, "I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to give up," they sit there for days on end. They cannot figure out how to untie this ungodly large knot around the part of the wagon that is pulled by the ox. So months go by. I don't know how Alexander the Great comes into the picture, if he found out that if he unties the knot, he can rule Asia. But regardless, Alexander the Great was already kind of a motivated guy. He already wanted to take over things. So when he heard from this, through the grapevine, literally, that if you untie this knot, you can rule Asia, he was really motivated. He was really ecstatic on what could be. And so he gets to this knot and he's trying to figure it out, right? As anybody would. He's trying to figure it out. He's trying to figure it out. He's trying to figure it out. He's almost ready to quit, but then something hits him. Now, before I tell you the answer, this is kind of that moment where either you are going to quit or you are going to succeed. There are people that are going to look at the knot and go, I need to untie the knot the proper way, as in feeding the working end, which is the end that is kind of hanging out, back through this monstrosity of a knot. A lot of people would think of that as the correct way to untie a knot. But Alexander the Great decides to embark on it a different way. He decides to take out his sword and cut in one swoop, per Wikipedia, one swoop, the man cuts the knot in two. Now, obviously, the knot is done with heavy gauge rope. Who knows Alexander's, the whole truth behind this? But regardless, Alexander basically cuts the knot. He cuts the knot unravels because, well, it's cut in half. There is not a knot anymore. And so the knot unravels, and guess what happens? Alexander the Great goes on and conquers basically every town in Asia and has this amazing story about him and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not going to get into the details of that. Now, it's funny, when I tell my kids that, I told my kids that actually tonight because I just learned about that story, they said, well, he cheated. He cheated in untying the knot. And it's interesting that my kids are 6 and the other one is 4, and they sleep in the same room on bunk beds. And when I told them the story, my oldest said he cheated. And I said, it depends on what your definition of cheat is. And it all depends on the definition of the rules. Now, did the rules state that you cannot chop it in half? Did the rules state that you cannot have a little pocket knife or a big hatchet, or you couldn't burn the knot, or whatever the case was? Were there rules in place? And obviously at that time, no. It was just a person that could untie the knot could rule Asia. And it was interesting, though, that we are conditioned from a very early age to understand that if you do something that nobody else can do, people assume that you cheated. And this is a little sidestep into the whole Gordon's Knot kind of deal, but isn't it interesting that we assume when people are successful at doing something that other people are not, we assume that they cheat? When we see people that are uber successful or started a business from the ground up or what claimed their riches or they got this or that or seduced a man or a woman to get married, people assume they cheated. If you're number one on a list of with other people that are in line behind you, people assume you cheated. If you are the home run champion for that year or multiple years back to back, people assume you cheated. If you're the best quarterback ever, people assume you cheated. If you're the best this or that, people assume you cheated. Which is interesting because even though they did not cheat, just because it was quote unquote impossible to that person's eyes, they assume they cheated. Very interesting. And so, for you, and in this message, and maybe this is your wake up call, instead of looking at people who are quote unquote successful or who are at the top of the pack or the number one this or that, instead of assuming that they cheated, A, don't judge them, but assume that they worked their tail off and they decided to think of the problem in a different light, like Gordon did, or I should say Alexander the Great did when he chopped the knot. Just because Alexander the Great decided to do something that nobody else thought of or tried, people think that he, quote unquote, or I should say my 6-year-old thinks that he cheated. Very interesting. And I would say I'm a pretty positive guy. I mean, there's times that I'm not very positive. There's times that I don't feel like being positive. But I try to instill a lot of good things in my kids, and which is funny because my kid is only 6, and he's already assuming that the guy cheated. Interesting. Which leads me into story number 2. Now, story number 2 is about Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus was embarking on this journey, right, to basically discover new land. And all the people in Europe were like, Christopher Columbus, you're crazy, dude. If you look out on the horizon, it looks like the world falls off. Or the water just ends. If you go out there, you will die. All the crew will die. So when he was trying to persuade the Queen of England to give him the finances to get his journey underway, he realized that a lot of people were against it. And he realized that he needed to win some people over to accomplish this goal. So he invited all his friends and all the naysayers and all the people that were in charge to a dinner party. And he asked all the people at the dinner party, what do they think about him going and discovering new land? And they thought it was outlandish, they thought it was ridiculous, and it's a waste of money, he's going to die, all that stuff. And so Christopher Columbus decided to take an egg. A simple egg, cooked or uncooked, it really doesn't matter. And he gave the egg to individuals and he said, I want you to try to balance an egg on its end. Now, as you know, if you can visualize an egg from a chicken, at one end it's very rounded, and then on the other end it's a little more tapered. It's not pointy by any means, but it's a little tapered, right? And so he wanted to see if the people in that room who called him a naysayer, or the people that were against it and thought he was going to do this and that and not be able to return, he offered them the ability to try to make an egg balance on its end. And over the course of the next 10, 20 minutes, he saw people trying to balance it on napkins and trying to balance it with spoons and all different types of things, but they could not. And they said, Christopher Columbus, this is impossible. And so Christopher Columbus grabbed the egg, and he took the egg with the pointy end and he simply crushed the pointy end just enough that it created a flat spot on the egg, and the egg was able to balance. And all the people in the world in the room said, "Oh, geez, yeah, of course. Well, if I would have known that, or that's simple. Of course you can do that." And it was a wake up call to everybody in the room, and the same kind of with Gordon's Knot, that even though there is a problem handed in front of you that you can get your hands on and try to conquer it, and if you are unable to do it, sometimes, majority of the time, I should say, we choose to limit ourselves in thinking that it can be done. If we see somebody in front of us try the knot, try the knot, try the knot, try the knot, they are unsuccessful, you go in there with the idea of I can do this, and you try the knot, try the knot, try the knot, a couple minutes go by, your passion, your desire to passing and completing that objective has diminished. And you shall too quit on trying to conquer the knot. It's a really interesting idea. It's a really interesting way to look at how things kind of operate. And it's a way to look at our problems in retrospect of the problems that we have in front of us seem impossible. They seem like nobody can conquer them. But in actuality, you can. You are just not looking at them with a new pair of glasses, as Zig Ziglar would say. If you change the glasses that you see your world through, you may be able to conquer the objectives in front of you. But instead of putting on the new glasses and analyzing and trying to think differently, we assume it's impossible and we decide to quit on it. But when we do see somebody finally conquer that feat in any area, from sports to business to personal to finances, we assume that they're cheating. But the only thing that they cheated or did differently than you and I is that they actually looked at the problem from a different perspective. They looked at the problem from a totally different way. And the people that see the world in a totally different light, the people that see the world in a totally different way, are the people that change the world. Legitly, in both cases, Christopher Columbus, right? He obviously won over the people that were in that room. That allowed him to get the finances to discover new land, and we all understand what happened there. The same with Alexander the Great. Now, was he still destined to take over Asia and conquer towns and cities? Maybe, but I would assume that by him slicing that knot, impossible knot, gave him the energy, motivation, and of course the shock value of all of his followers to go, oh my gosh, this guy's legit. Let's go with him, right? And the same is true today. The people that are able to conquer the most or the most daunting, challenging ideas are the ones that truly get the prize, truly change the world. And so again, the problems that are in your lap, the problems that you see, the problems that you will encounter are not impossible. They are not impassable. They are not the thing that you are going to lay down and go, "Oh my gosh, this is where I stop my life." In actuality, they are able to be conquered. The choice is yours. Are you willing to look at it in a different light? Are you willing to look at it from a perspective of not I'm not going to quit, I'm not going to quit, to how else could I figure how to accomplish this task? And wrapping back to the beginning of the good ideas of never quit, work harder, all that stuff, I think in some retrospect it puts blinders on, and it makes us think that if we just keep our head down and keep on grinding away at that problem or that task at hand, we shall be successful. And sometimes that's not the case. I think it's good, it's a good starting point, but when the motivation, the want, the lust starts to dissipate, I think that's where we need to kick into our brain and go to level two here and think of a different way of how to conquer the problem that lies in front of us. So it's an interesting story. It's an interesting theory. It's an interesting way to look at our problems, our life, or the world that we are all involved in, and to see what could possibly be. So, with that being said, I'm going to let you go with those two quick stories, the Gordian Knot, and then, of course, with Christopher Columbus and the egg. The Christopher Columbus and the egg is also a true story. There was actually a big monument, I think in Brazil or somewhere in South America, where they have a giant boat going through a giant egg, which is kind of crazy. So do your own research. See if I'm telling the truth here or if I'm just blowing smoke up the old back end. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys. If you need anything from me, send me an email, jake@operationselfreset.com. If you know of somebody that could use a little bit of extra pep in their step, feel free to offer up this podcast. It's 100% free. It's 100% from the heart. And go out there and be freaking awesome. So take care, guys. We'll talk to you next week, Wednesday.